Good afternoon. It is April 2nd, Thursday, April 2nd. And again, if you saw my video yesterday, you saw I started to get plagued with the recording virus, and it struck me again today. I thought I hit start recording. I did the whole thing just to realize that I didn't never hit start recording. So this again is my second go, but that's all right. It gives me time to practice, and maybe it'll be better the second time around today. Again, if it's not, the first time was just moving, and hopefully we'll get this figured out. It's funny how much time I sit here and what I feel like staring at a camera, talking to no one, but hopefully it's getting easier and it's getting better for y'all. We are beginning to look in Philippians chapter 2 today. We're going to look at Philippians chapter 2, verses 18 through 30. We could be tempted as we read through this, and we will read through it in a moment, but just to simply think that Paul is directing traffic, that he's going to be talking about Timothy, he's going to be talking about Epaphroditus, and he's going to say, well, I'm going to send Timothy to you, I'm going to send Epaphroditus to you, and I hope to come to you soon. And just leave it at that there's not much more to it in here. But I think there are some good points of application for us in this text, even as it mostly seems administrative, as Paul is giving us some instruction on these two men, and I think they're good points of application for how we are to live as well in this time. Interestingly, I think as we come to this text, we really see Paul focusing on relationships, that there's a loss of relationship and a loss of fellowship and communion. And we live in a time that is, we have so many avenues at our fingertips. I mean, can you imagine what it would have been like for Paul to be able to sit down and to record a video and to send it to the churches? Even to have something like that would have been amazing. And yet, even with all the connectedness we have through email and through text and through phone calls and through videos such as these, there still is a great distance that we feel. What it would be to be able to reach through this camera and to be able to hug your neck or to see you, to talk to you, and face to face. There's something lacking, something missing from our fellowship together as individuals. And so even in this time where we're so connected, that we're still very disconnected. And Paul's talking in our text today about the connectedness, the connections that we have in the body of Christ. And he's going to do this through pointing us to these two men, Timothy and Epaphroditus. We're going to see Paul's love for these two men and his desire to see them used to strengthen the church. So if you have your Bibles, if you want to read with me, you can. If not, you can just listen. I'm going to read from Philippians 2, verses 19 to 30. I hope in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you soon, so that I too may be cheered by news of you. For I have no one like him who will be genuinely concerned for your welfare. They all seek their own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. But you know Timothy's proven worth, how as a son with a father he has served me in the gospel. I hope therefore to send him just as soon as I see how it will go with me. And I trust in the Lord that shortly I myself will also come. I have thought it necessary to send to you Epaphroditus, my brother and fellow worker and fellow soldier, and your messenger and minister to my need. For he has been longing for you all and has been distressed because you heard he was ill. Indeed, he was ill, near to death. But God had mercy on him, and not only on him, but on me also, lest I should have sorrow upon sorrow. I am the more eager to send him, therefore, that you may rejoice at seeing him again, that I may be less anxious. So receive him in the Lord with all joy and honor such men. For he nearly died for the work of Christ, risking his life to complete what was lacking in your service to me. Again, we see here Paul beginning by pointing out two men who he's going to send to them. First Timothy and then Epaphroditus. And we could be tempted to just simply move on and understand, well, Paul desires to send them. That's good. He's going to talk about how he's going to do that. But again, I think there's some great points of application. First off, he says about Timothy, there's no one like him who would be genuinely concerned for your welfare. In Timothy, we see a man who is genuinely concerned for the welfare of others. I think it brings us to a good, interesting question. Are we genuinely concerned for the welfare of others? Not just in word, but in action. Are we concerned for the welfare of those around us? Are we concerned in such a way that we're promoting others' welfare as opposed to our own? I think this is a hard thing. I think that we can be tempted, certainly even in times where we're not having to be quarantined and socially distant, to allow church to become somewhat superficial, I say church, but any of our gatherings, to be somewhat superficial, where we come in and we're nodding our heads. Oh, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. How are you doing? Oh, yeah, I'm doing good. And they don't go much deeper than that. But are we genuinely concerned with others' welfare? Are we able to allow others to be concerned with our welfare? I think it's both sides, right? We have to be willing to be open to others so they may know what we're going through, and at the same time be willing to really understand and love others and promote their welfare. And it's a hard thing. We talk about living in this time where the world has become so small, and yet even though the world feels so small, I wonder sometimes if we aren't more distant than we've ever been. We can live socially isolated lives on the internet each and every day, where we can just post something to Facebook and we call that interaction. And it is to a degree, but it's not the same, where we're not really getting into each other's lives and the lives of those others around us and knowing what's going on. And so much to the point where I think we even become to the point where we don't share what's going on in our lives. We don't share our fears and anxieties and worries with other people because we just assume that they don't need that and they don't want that. We're not concerned and worried about each other's welfare. And then we wonder sometimes why don't they understand what's going on with me? And we don't know, And it's just we've been trained and taught not to show weakness, right? So I'm even sitting here, I shouldn't come to you and say, "Oh, I'm a terribly insecure person," and I am. I am terribly insecure, always wondering what people are thinking about me and whether I measure up to the expectation of what others want me to be. And in many ways, even knowing that this is going out into the internet, it's easier for me to tell a camera than it is to tell someone face to face. It's hard when we talk about being concerned with each other's welfare to really get into each other's lives. That's a hard thing. But that's what we're called to be. We're called to be those who are genuinely concerned with each other's welfare. This is what Paul says Timothy is, and we need to be doing that. Even in this time, we need to be concerned with others' welfare, and to a large degree, that right now looks like staying away, sadly. How I would long to just drive to one of your houses and to sit with you and to see you, but being concerned with your welfare means, no, I don't do that. And I feel fine, right? I might sneeze here and there, but I don't have a fever and I'm not congested. But we don't know. It's uncertain, right? I went to Walmart this morning. What have I picked up there? What might I have? It's the mites, and so we concern with welfare by distancing at this point. But then there's going to be a time coming in weeks to come where that goes away. And the way we're concerned with others' welfare changes. And we need to be in each other's lives and in each other's houses, knowing each other's struggles and worries. Oh, if that comes out of this time of isolation, that we become more open and honest with each other, wouldn't that be an amazing thing Paul puts this in contrast with Timothy, in contrast with, in verse 21, with other people who seek their own interest and not those of Jesus Christ. This is the mark. How do we put others first? It's by not being first and foremost concerned with our own interest. It's by first and foremost being concerned with the welfare of others. And this really attacks us at a fundamental level that we don't like, because ultimately we're selfish people. We could almost point all sin back to being selfish, even though the sin of the fall was about Adam and Eve being selfish and wanting to be like God. And how do we stop being selfish and stop seeking our own interest, no matter what we're going through? And we're all going through a lot. I can be tempted to say at times, well, they don't know what I'm going through. They don't know what my struggles are. So why should I worry about them, right? And that's wrong. We need to, even in our own worries and concerns and cares, put the interests of others first. And it becomes this wonderful thing, right? If the church is all putting each other's self-interest first, then everyone is being cared for. Of course, that's what we should be ideally. That's certainly what we're not. This is what Timothy is. Paul treats him as a father to his son. This is often something he does. He says, I hope to send him to you soon. And for me also to come. Again, Paul expresses his desire to come, to be connected, to be in relationship with one another. Paul then turns in verses 25 through 30, the end of the chapter, speaking of Epaphroditus. And we see here Epaphroditus is a man who was sent by the Philippians to Paul to care for him and tend to him in his distress. We see as we read these verses here that as he was with Paul, he got ill. He got ill to the point of almost dying. But he didn't die. He recovered. And certainly we see here Paul saying something, and he says in verse 27, but God had mercy on him, and not only on him, but also on me. I think that this is interesting because, particularly in light of what Paul has already said in chapter 1. This is Paul who's just said, to live is Christ, but to die is gain. You might say, or make an argument here with Paul, well, Paul, if you're going to be consistent in your theology, then you should have prayed that Epaphroditus went to be with the Lord. Because that's better, right? It's far better to be with the Lord. And yet what Paul says here is that God had mercy not only on him, but on the Philippians, so that they didn't experience, as he says here, sorrow upon sorrow. It's not that Paul is contradicting himself. It's not that he's saying, speaking out of both sides of his mouth. It's Paul acknowledging something about death, that death is wholly unnatural. Death is not how things should be. Death is, in fact, a product of the fall. And when those around us die, we experience sorrow upon sorrow. And certainly we see this right now going on around us. It's so much more, I think, in front of our face, because certainly there are those who die every single day. And yet there is an influx of this news as we are inundated with the news on COVID-19, on the coronavirus. We hear stories each and every day of different people who have died from all kinds of different age ranges after contracting the coronavirus. And we can imagine, and we know that there are families and loved ones who are experiencing sorrow upon sorrow at the loss of their loved ones. And this is acknowledging a very poignant truth that death is not natural for us. It was never meant to be for us. We were created not to die, not to have partings. And so Paul is thankful, particularly in his own condition, that he didn't have to sorrow at the loss of a loved one who had cared for him so well, but also that the Philippians who had sent Epaphroditus to Paul didn't have to experience that sorrow upon sorrow at losing their loved one. And so now Paul longs to send him back so that they might rejoice in seeing him again. And Paul says that he would even be less anxious. There's a reduction in Paul's anxiety of knowing that this one person he loved gets to go back and see and fellowship and be united with his friends and his family from the place that he was from. There's great joy in that. I think I daily, I've gotten to the point where I think about that first Sunday we get to be back together, and there is going to be for me a relief of anxiety of knowing that you are all there and that we're well and we get to see each other, and there's going to be rejoicing and fellowshipping, and it's going to be a joyous time. I really believe we're going to see a picture like of this like we've never seen in many of our lifetimes, of this coming back together and getting to do something that we love to do and that we've been unable to do. The last point of application I want us to see here is that Paul says, receive him with joy and honor such men. We're to honor those who die for the work of, who nearly die or do die for the work of the gospel. There is honor in that. And I think that there's a couple of points of application I want us to see here, because I think we need to acknowledge the fact that there are men and women, and I'm not saying that all these men and women are Christians or not. I don't know there's the eternal reality for each individual out there, but there are men and women out there right now, first responders and doctors and nurses and all kinds of healthcare workers and janitors and grocery store clerks and everything else, who are risking their life. They're putting their lives on the line for us. And I think we need to rightly honor. There's a great opportunity for us. If you're going to the grocery store, you have to go see a physician. Thank them, pray for them. So ask how you can be praying for them and for their families in this time. Honor them for what they're doing. There's thankfully the common grace of Jesus extends to all people, and there are people right now who are in real danger. That's a real danger for the sake of the gospel, or for the sake of our health, not for the gospel. But Paul specifically is speaking here towards those who put their lives on the line for the sake of the gospel. We think of the martyrs of the faith throughout the history of the Christian church, those who have put themselves in harm's way. There's even missionaries today, this very day, who are serving in countries that are hostile to them. And we need to honor such men and women who are putting their lives on the line for the sake of the gospel. Those who risk their life to complete the joy, what is lacking in us. As Paul says of Epaphroditus, risking his life to complete what was lacking in your service to me. And we send out missionaries and we send out people, and they serve in such a way that we cannot always do. And so we need to honor and rejoice in such individuals. And that brings us to the conclusion of our text today. But as we continue through this, I encourage you to reach out, to consider the welfare of others. There's ways right now that we can only do it virtually. We can only reach out to one another through phone text, through phone calls, through emails, through Facebook, whatever it is, whatever different avenues you're using. And do that. Check on your loved one. Check on your church members. Check on your neighbors. See how they're doing, not only physically, but emotionally. Check on them in their anxiety and in their worry. Bring comfort that is from the Lord. But also let this be something that moves you to that moment when we are able to come back together. And would we be more open and honest with who we are and what we're doing, and seeking the welfare of those around us? If we can learn even that lesson, wouldn't it be so valuable to have this time to learn that? We'll be back tomorrow with another video as we continue in the letter to the Philippians. We'll begin chapter 3. If you like the video, I ask you to like it, and you can subscribe. Towards the end of the video, there'll be a little circle on this side up in the corner that has the church logo. You can click on that to subscribe to the channel, Hopefully we'll give you notifications when we post a new video. And then share it if you think there's value in this, to share it with others who may find some hope in it as well, comfort in it as well. Look forward to being back with you tomorrow as we continue in this study. Praying for you. Hope you're all doing well, and I hope we get to see you soon.